So when you walk on wet cement, you leave a footprint.
Right.
It hardens, it sets, and it's just there forever.
Right.
Someone walking by, like 20 years later, can look at that imprint and think they know exactly who made that.
Yeah, they see the size of the shoe or the depth of the tread.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they construct this entire narrative about the person who walked there.
Oh, absolutely. And I would argue that no one executed a disappearance from that kind of permanent footprint better than Andrea Kovacs.
Yeah.
I mean, to the internet, she is forever frozen as the early 2000s media star Allysin Chaynes. But the real Andrea, she engineered this incredibly lucrative exit strategy. She basically walked away from a highly controversial, heavily scrutinized career into just complete, untraceable privacy.
And we are looking at exactly how she pulled that off today. Welcome to the deep dive. We're going to unpack this whole journey, for you listening, because the tension between a permanent public record and a private reality is just fascinating here.
It really is. And we should establish right up front, this isn't just a basic biography we're doing.
No, definitely not.
It's really a case study in personal branding. It's about navigating a controversial field and that massive tension between the public image she sold and her actual private reality.
Right, because that tension really began the moment Andrea realized her childhood plans were kind of falling apart.
Yeah.
She was born in Alba, Romania in 1979. She's of Hungarian and Romanian descent, and she moved to California's San Fernando Valley as a kid. And her original dream was honestly incredibly conventional.
Oh, yeah. Very standard LA dream.
Right. She just wanted to be a mainstream actress. She was taking acting classes in high school, really trying to build a traditional path.
But the logistics of child acting well, it requires an immense infrastructure that her family simply couldn't provide.
What do you mean by infrastructure?
I mean, to succeed in mainstream auditions as a minor, you essentially need a parent willing to work as an unpaid full-time manager and chauffeur.
Ah, right. Someone to drive you everywhere.
Exactly. And her parents were working demanding jobs just to stay afloat. They didn't have the bandwidth to shuttle her across Los Angeles for casting calls every day.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Combine that with her own admission that she was a naturally shy, introverted teenager, and the mainstream Hollywood door effectively closed before she even really reached it.
Which makes the pivot at age 18 just so jarring. I mean, around 1997, her home life becomes incredibly difficult. She decides she has to move out.
Which is a huge deal at 18.
Right. And that immediately creates a terrifying problem. She needs rent money, and she needs it yesterday.
Right. The pressure is on.
So she and her boyfriend at the time, they're scanning the newspaper for jobs, and they answer an ad placed by a director named Randy West. And within a week, she goes from a shy high schooler with traditional acting dreams to launching a career in films for mature audiences.
It is a radical transition, and it's born entirely out of economic necessity. Like in 1997, the mature entertainment industry in the San Fernando Valley was experiencing this massive boom.
The transition from VHS to the internet, right?
Exactly. It was a chaotic, highly lucrative space, but also one that was, frankly, fraught with exploitation. To survive in that environment as an 18-year-old, you cannot walk onto a set as your vulnerable self.
No, you get eaten alive.
You have to build a wall. And this is where the creation of the persona becomes just a critical survival mechanism.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second.
Yeah.
Because it is so weird to me that a shy young girl would choose the name of a heavy metal grunge band as that wall.
It's pretty funny, yeah.
Like, she originally wanted the stage name Alice in Wonderland simply because she liked the name Allison.
Which is a lot more innocent.
Right. But the director, Randy West, he warns her about potential copyright issues with Disney, or like the Lewis Carroll estate. So he suggests Chaynes, as in the band Allysin Chaynes, and she just accepts it. She becomes Allysin Chaynes.
Do you think adopting a heavy metal sounding name was essentially a protective alter ego for her?
Oh, without a doubt. It makes perfect sense when you realize it wasn't just a branding choice, it was psychological armor. Armor, yeah.
Creating a distinct, almost aggressively contrasting persona allows an individual to completely sever their core identity from their day job. Andrea Kovacs was the shy Romanian immigrant who needed to pay rent.
Right.
Allysin Chaynes was the fearless, heavy metal-sounding performer who could walk onto a chaotic set and perform on command. By adopting a name with a bit of a hard edge, she established a firm boundary. The industry got Allysin. They never got Andrea.
Wow. Yeah. And she protected that boundary fiercely in the real world, too. There is this fascinating moment in the sources where she actually attends a mainstream event and ends up meeting the real band, Allysin Chaynes.
Oh, that's wild.
Yeah, and instead of using it as a networking moment or a funny icebreaker, she introduces herself just as Allysin.
She didn't tell them.
No. She intentionally kept her last name a secret because she figured the band would be furious if they found out she was using a play on their name in her specific controversial line of work.
That is so telling. She is compartmentalizing in real time right there.
Yeah, totally.
She is basically acting as her own public relations manager, calculating the risk of her mature media brand bleeding into her mainstream interactions. And that hyper-vigilant management of her persona is exactly what allowed her to build such a massive, lucrative footprint.
Right.
She didn't just survive in this controversial field, she dominated a very specific niche.
Yeah, the sheer volume of her output is just staggering. I mean, she appeared in over 350 films.
Which is an insane workload.
It really is. By 2000 and 2001, she is sweeping major industry awards. She's leveraging her popularity to branch out She even voiced the lead character, Angela, in an English-dubbed anime called Vicious.
It's a huge crossover.
Yeah. And the director, Randy West, later noted that she had this distinct star presence. He actually compared her to a young Jenna Jameson. High praise in that industry. Definitely. She blended this Eastern European background with a very specific, upbeat California girl energy. She stood at exactly 5 feet tall, very petite frame, and she leaned into these youthful comedic roles. Like her long-running Kelly the Coed series was a massive hit.
Because it was character-driven.
Exactly. She wasn't just performing. She was playing a recurring, energetic character that audiences really latched onto.
But you know, the reality of producing those hundreds of films was far from the glamorous image projected on the box covers.
Oh, sure.
The late 90s and early 2000s in that space lacked a lot of the standardized protocols we see in media today. She was navigating grueling shoots that stretched anywhere from 3 to 12 hours.
12 hours?
Yeah. And a 12-hour day on an independent set means navigating poor lighting conditions, extensive waiting periods, and managing the unpredictable temperaments of co-stars and directors.
I always push back on this societal assumption that work in the mature media space is just an easy paycheck.
It's anything but easy.
Right. When you look at the mechanics of what she was actually doing, it required an immense amount of focus and discipline. Because of her petite 5-foot frame, she had strict physical limitations. She had to constantly negotiate scenes on the fly, clearly articulating what she would and would not do on camera.
She had to be her own advocate.
Exactly. She was actively managing her own safety in an environment designed to push boundaries.
And that shows incredible self-awareness. She approached her career as a strictly B2B, business-to-business transaction.
I like that framing, B2B.
Right, because the industry demands novelty and compliance. She provided a specific, reliable character, but she enforced absolute limits on her time and physical boundaries.
Yeah.
Unlike many of her peers who fell into the trap of transient lifestyles, moving constantly and struggling with the psychological toll of the work, she maintained a rigid separation. She lived a quiet, normal life off camera.
She treated it like a day job.
Literally just a day job. She treated this highly controversial industry entirely as a stepping stone, basically venture capital, to fund her eventual financial independence.
But the nature of any visual media, especially one that relies heavily on a specific physical aesthetic, is that you can't play the co-ed forever.
No, the clock is always ticking.
The market eventually demands evolution. And that necessity leads us to her most debated career move, and honestly, the intense fallout that followed. In 2003, she decides she needs to expand her marketability.
Right.
She wants to transition into cable television movies, feature dancing, and more versatile roles. And to do this, she undergoes a cosmetic surgery specifically, a breast enhancement.
And from a purely economic standpoint, it is a calculated business decision.
Right.
She is altering her physical asset to meet the demands of a higher-paying, slightly more mainstream tier of mature media. But she's doing this in a niche industry where the audience dynamic is profoundly different from mainstream Hollywood.
Oh, the fan reaction was explosive. And the wildest part is that you can look at internet forums in 2024, like 20 years after the surgery, and fans are still aggressively arguing about it.
Wow. Still.
You have users fighting in the comments, with one side claiming the change completely ruined her original natural petite vibe, while the other side defends her right to evolve her brand.
That is so intense.
It really reminds me of an indie musician, like one who builds a rabid following with a raw acoustic sound. The fans feel like they discovered them.
Right, they feel a sense of ownership.
Yes. Then the band signs to a major label. They buy synthesizers, polish their tracks, and those original fans just lose their minds, calling them sellouts. Do you think audiences in niche, mature media feel an unhealthy level of ownership over a performer's literal body?
What's fascinating here is that it is the exact same psychological mechanism as the indie band, but amplified to a dangerous degree because the instrument changing is the woman's physical form.
Right, it's her actual body.
Exactly. In niche media, the relationship is highly parasocial. The audience feels a sense of ownership because their consumption of the media is deeply personal.
Yeah.
When a performer changes the physical aesthetic that a fan has projected their own nostalgia onto, the fan perceives it as a personal betrayal, and it points to a much broader issue. Women in the spotlight are constantly trapped in this double bind.
How so?
Well, the market penalizes them if they age or stay stagnant, demanding novelty. But if they take agency and alter their appearance to meet those new demands, they are vilified for abandoning their authentic self.
Damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Exactly.
And the toll of that visibility wasn't just limited to angry internet forums either. The real-world consequences eventually caught up with her in just a devastating way.
Yeah, this part of the story is rough.
It really is. Her conservative parents had no idea what she did for a living. They thought she was just working out in California. But her sister found out. And when the sister got in trouble with their parents for her own rebellious behavior, she used Andrea as a human shield.
Ugh, that's terrible.
She totally deflected the parents' anger by telling their mother to go look up Andrea on the internet.
It is just a brutal collision of two completely segregated worlds.
Yeah.
The protective wall she built with the Allysin Chaynes persona was breached, not by the media, but by her own family using her digital footprint as a weapon.
And the fallout was a year-long estrangement from her mother. In interviews from that period, the frustration and the pain are so evident. Like, she kept trying to explain to her family that the work was just a job.
Right.
She said something like, "I'm a nice person, and it's just what I do for a living. It has nothing to do with who I really am." But her parents just couldn't separate the reality of the internet search results from the daughter they raised.
And this is the crushing weight of digital permanence.
Yeah.
I mean, before the internet, a career in adult media could eventually just fade away into obscure VHS bins. But she was working right as the internet began to index everything forever.
Right, searchable.
Forever searchable. She realized that her face, her stage name, and the most controversial moments of her workday were going to be globally accessible indefinitely. Her family's reaction was essentially a preview of how the rest of the world would view her for the rest of her life.
She admitted later that she wished she had thought harder about that permanence when she was 18. But once the realization set in, it seems to be the catalyst for her final act.
Yeah, she starts looking for the exit.
Right. She realizes the industry has given her the capital she needs, but it is taking way too heavy an emotional toll. So she begins to orchestrate her exit strategy.
And she officially retires in 2005. She does one brief, final project in 2007, but that's it. And her exit strategy is incredibly revealing about who she actually is as a person.
How do you mean?
Well, in this specific industry, the typical pipeline for a retiring star is to leverage their name recognition. They start their own production company, they move into directing, or they launch their own subscription sites. They stay adjacent to the ecosystem.
Because it's what they know.
Right. But she explicitly rejects all of that. She takes the venture capital she earned from hundreds of grueling hours on set, and she walks away entirely.
Yeah, she enrolls in a junior college.
Exact.
She studies business, she pursues certifications and personal training, and she talks about her deep passion for becoming a nutritionist. She doesn't want to be a media mogul. She wants to study health and wellness.
She successfully executed the B2B transaction we talked about earlier.
Right, the venture capital phase.
She traded her image for financial security, and the absolute second she hit her target, she ceased production. She transitioned the brand back to the private citizen. Today, she is completely off the grid. She is married, she's raising 3 children, and she has 0 active social media presence.
And here's where it gets really interesting to me. In a culture where people will do literally anything for 5 minutes of viral attention, she achieved peak visibility and then actively chose to be invisible.
It's almost unheard of now.
It is. But here is the bizarre epilogue to all of this. Because she lives a completely quiet analog life now, the internet algorithm hates the vacuum. The machine needs content to generate ad revenue, right?
It always needs to feed the search engine.
So if you search her name in the year 2026, decades after she left the industry, you don't find the suburban nutritionist. You find a hallucinated digital ghost.
Yeah, the SEO farms and automated VIP FAQ sites, they simply scrape the internet for recognizable names and fill in templates to generate clicks.
It is entirely surreal. I was looking at one. There is a VIP FAQ site right now claiming that her net worth in 2026 is over $430 million.
Oh, wow. 400 million.
Yes. And it specifically details that this wealth is tied up in imaginary yachts, private airplanes, and luxury real estate empires.
That's hilarious.
The internet has frozen her in time as a Y2K media star and then extrapolated this insane billionaire lifestyle onto a woman who is likely just driving a minivan to soccer practice and meal prepping for her family.
It really highlights the absolute absurdity of our digital ecosystem.
Totally.
The algorithm machinery doesn't care about the truth of Andrea Kovacs at all. It only cares about monetizing the search volume for Allysin Chaynes.
Right, it's just about the clicks.
But the irony is that this automated noise actually serves as the perfect final layer of armor.
Oh, that's a great point.
The internet is so busy generating fake yachts and arguing over a 20-year-old cosmetic surgery that the real woman is left completely alone to live her life in peace.
Wow, she won the ultimate game of hide and seek. When we look at the totality of her journey, we see a masterclass in compartmentalization.
Truly.
A shy teenager who needed rent money, answered an ad, built a highly lucrative brand in a deeply controversial and exploitative industry, enforced her boundaries, funded her own education, and then just vanished.
Because her ultimate success wasn't the awards or the hundreds of films. Her true success was the reclamation of her own narrative.
Yeah.
She used an industry built on commodifying women to buy back her total autonomy and anonymity.
And you know, for everyone listening, we live in an era where the primary currency is attention. Millions of people are broadcasting every mundane detail of their lives, desperately trying to build a personal brand, hoping to leave a massive footprint in the wet cement of the internet.
Right, everyone wants to go viral.
Exactly. But maybe the real power play isn't getting everyone to look at your footprint. Maybe the ultimate flex is having the leverage to wipe your hands clean, step off the sidewalk, and disappear entirely, knowing that you never needed their gaze to build your life in the first place.